There was one other house, and they tried a third time. The woman here was more amiable, but she had little room to spare, and could only agree to take in Sue and the children if her husband could go elsewhere. This arrangement they perforce adopted, in the stress from delaying their search till so late. They came to terms with her, though her price was rather high for their pockets, but they could not afford to be critical till Jude had time to get a more permanent abode, and in this house Sue took possession of a back room on the second floor with an inner closet room for the children. Jude stayed and had a cup of tea, and was pleased to find that the window commanded the back of another of the colleges. Kissing all four, he went to get a few necessaries and look for lodgings for himself. When he was gone, the landlady came up to talk a little with Sue, and gather something of the circumstances of the family she had taken in. Sue had not the art of prevarication, and, after admitting several facts as to their late difficulties and wanderings, she was startled by the landlady saying suddenly, "Are you really a married woman?" Sue hesitated, and then impulsively told the woman that her husband and herself had each been unhappy in their first marriages, after which, terrified at the thought of a second irrevocable union, and lest the conditions of the contract should kill their love, yet wishing to be together, they had literally not found the courage to repeat it, though they had attempted it 2 or 3 times. Therefore, though in her own sense of the words she was a married woman, in the landlady's sense she was not. The housewife looked embarrassed, and went downstairs. Sue sat by the window in a reverie, watching the rain. Her quiet was broken by the noise of someone entering the house, and then the voices of a man and woman in conversation in the passage below. The landlady's husband had arrived, and she was explaining to him the incoming of the lodgers during his absence. His voice rose in sudden anger. "Now who wants such a woman here, and perhaps a confinement? Besides, didn't I say I wouldn't have children? The hall and stairs fresh painted to be kicked about by them. You must have known all was not straight with 'em, coming like that, taking in a family when I said a single man." The wife expostulated, but, as it seemed, the husband insisted on his point, for presently a tap came to Sue's door, and the woman appeared. "I am sorry to tell you, ma'am," she said, "that I can't let you have the room for the week after all. My husband objects, and therefore I must ask you to go. I don't mind your staying over tonight, as it is getting late in the afternoon, but I shall be glad if you can leave early in the morning." Though she knew that she was entitled to the lodging for a week, Sue did not wish to create a disturbance between the wife and husband, and she said she would leave as requested. When the landlady had gone, Sue looked out of the window again. Finding that the rain had ceased, she proposed to the boy that after putting the little ones to bed, they should go out and search about for another place, and bespeak it for the morrow, so as not to be so hard driven then as they had been that day. Therefore, instead of unpacking her boxes, which had just been sent on from the station by Jude, they sallied out into the damp, though not unpleasant streets, Sue resolving not to disturb her husband with the news of her notice to quit, while he was perhaps worried in obtaining a lodging for himself. In the company of the boy she wandered into this street and into that, but though she tried a dozen different houses, she fared far worse alone than she had fared in Jude's company, and could get nobody to promise her a room for the following day. Every householder looked askance at such a woman and child inquiring for accommodation in the gloom. "I ought not to be born, ought I?" said the boy with misgiving. Thoroughly tired at last, Sue returned to the place where she was not welcome, but where at least she had temporary shelter. In her absence, Jude had left his address, but knowing how weak he still was, she adhered to her determination not to disturb him till the next day. 2. Sue sat looking at the bare floor of the room, the house being little more than an old intramural cottage, and then she regarded the scene outside the uncurtained window. At some distance opposite, the outer walls of Sarcophagus College, silent, black, and windowless, threw their 4 centuries of gloom, bigotry, and decay into the little room she occupied, shutting out the moonlight by night and the sun by day. The outlines of Rubric College also were discernible beyond the other, and the tower of a third farther off still. She thought of the strange operation of a single-minded man's ruling passion, that it should have led Jude, who loved her and the children so tenderly, to place them here in this depressing purlieu, because he was still haunted by his dream. Even now he did not distinctly hear the freezing negative that those scholared walls had echoed to his desire. The failure to find another lodging, and the lack of room in this house for his father, had made a deep impression on the boy. A brooding, undemonstrative horror seemed to have seized him. The silence was broken by his saying, "Mother, what shall we do tomorrow?" "I don't know," said Sue despondently. "I'm afraid this will trouble your father." "I wish father was quite well, and there had been room for him. Then it wouldn't matter so much. Poor father." "It wouldn't. Can I do anything?" "No. All is trouble, adversity, and suffering. Father went away to give us children room, didn't he?" "Partly." "It would be better to be out of the world than in it, wouldn't it?" "It would almost, dear." "'Tis because of us children, too, isn't it, that you can't get a good lodging?" "Well, people do object to children sometimes." "Then if children make so much trouble, why do people have 'em?" "Oh, because it is a law of nature." "But we don't ask to be born?" "No, indeed. And what makes it worse with me is that you are not my real mother, and you needn't have had me unless you liked. I oughtn't to have come to 'ee, that's the real truth. I troubled him in Australia, and I trouble folk here. I wish I hadn't been born." "You couldn't help it, my dear." "I think that whenever children be born that are not wanted, they should be killed directly, before their souls come to 'em, and not allowed to grow big and walk about." Sue did not reply. She was doubtfully pondering how to treat this too reflective child. She at last concluded that, so far as circumstances permitted, she would be honest and candid with one who entered into her difficulties like an aged friend. "There is going to be another in our family soon," she hesitatingly remarked. "How?" "There is going to be another baby." "What?" The boy jumped up wildly. "Oh, God, Mother! You've never a cent for another, and such trouble with what you've got." "Yes, I have, I am sorry to say," murmured Sue, her eyes glistening with suspended tears. The boy burst out weeping. "Oh, you don't care, you don't care!" he cried in bitter reproach. "However could you, Mother, be so wicked and cruel as this, when you needn't have done it till we was better off, and father well, to bring us all into more trouble? No room for us, and father a forced to go away, and we turned out tomorrow, and yet you'll be going to have another of us soon. 'Tis done o' purpose, 'tis. He walked up and down, sobbing. You must forgive me, little Jude," she pleaded, her bosom heaving now as much as the boy's. "I can't explain. I will when you are older. It does seem as if I had done it on purpose, now we are in these difficulties. I can't explain, dear, but It is not quite on purpose. I can't help it." "Yes, it is. It must be. For nobody would interfere with us like that unless you agreed. I won't forgive you ever, ever. I'll never believe you care for me, or Father, or any of us any more." He got up and went away into the closet adjoining her room, in which a bed had been spread on the floor. There she heard him say, "If we children was gone, there'd be no trouble at all." "Don't think that, dear," she cried rather peremptorily, "but go to sleep." The following morning she awoke at a little past 6, and decided to get up and run across before breakfast to the inn which Jude had informed her to be his quarters, to tell him what had happened before he went out. She arose softly to avoid disturbing the children, who, as she knew, must be fatigued by their exertions of yesterday. She found Jude at breakfast in the obscure tavern he had chosen as counterpoise to the expense of her lodging, and she explained to him her homelessness. He had been so anxious about her all night, he said. Somehow, now it was morning, the request to leave the lodging did not seem such a depressing incident as it had seemed the night before, nor did even her failure to find another place affect her so deeply as at first. Jude agreed with her that it would not be worth while to insist upon her right to stay a week, but to take immediate steps for removal. "You must all come to this inn for a day or two," he said. "It is a rough place, and it will not be so nice for the children. We shall have more time to look round. There are plenty of lodgings in the suburbs, in my old quarter of Beersheba. Have breakfast with me now, you are here, my bird, and you are sure you are well? There will be plenty of time to get back and prepare the children's meal before they wake. In fact, I'll go with you." She joined Jude in a hasty meal, and in a quarter of an hour they started together, resolving to clear out from Sue's too respectable lodging immediately. On reaching the place and going upstairs, she found that all was quiet in the children's room, and called to the landlady in timorous tones to please bring up the tea-kettle and something for their breakfast. This was perfunctorily done, and producing a couple of eggs which she had brought with her, she put them into the boiling kettle, and summoned Jude to watch them for the youngsters, while she went to call them, it being now about 8:30. Jude stood bending over the kettle, with his watch in his hand, timing the eggs, so that his back was turned to the little inner chamber where the children lay. A shriek from Sue suddenly caused him to start round. He saw that the door of the room, or rather closet, which had seemed to go heavily upon its hinges as she pushed it back, was open, and that Sue had sunk to the floor just within it. Hastening forward to pick her up, he turned his eyes to the little bed spread on the boards. No children were there. He looked in bewilderment round the room. At the back of the door were fixed 2 hooks for hanging garments, and from these the forms of the 2 youngest children were suspended by a piece of box cord round each of their necks, while from a nail a few yards off the body of little Jude was hanging in a similar manner. An overturned chair was near the elder boy, and his glazed eyes were slanted into the room, but those of the girl and the baby boy were closed. Half paralyzed by the strange and consummate horror of the scene, he let Sue lie, cut the cords with his pocket-knife, and threw the 3 children on the bed, but the feel of their bodies in the momentary handling seemed to say that they were dead. He caught up Sue, who was in fainting fits, and put her on the bed in the other room, after which he breathlessly summoned the landlady and ran out for a doctor. When he got back, Sue had come to herself, and the 2 helpless women, bending over the children in wild efforts to restore them, and the triplet of little corpses, formed a sight which overthrew his self-command. The nearest surgeon came in, but, as Jude had inferred, his presence was superfluous. The children were past saving, for though their bodies were still barely cold, it was conjectured that they had been hanging more than an hour. The probability held by the parents later on, when they were able to reason on the case, was that the elder boy, on waking, looked into the outer room for Sue, and finding her absent, was thrown into a fit of aggravated despondency that the events and information of the evening before had induced in his morbid temperament. Moreover, a piece of paper was found upon the floor, on which was written in the boy's hand, with the bit of lead pencil that he carried, "Done because we are too many." At sight of this, Sue's nerves utterly gave way. An awful conviction that her discourse with the boy had been the main cause of the tragedy, throwing her into a convulsive agony which knew no abatement. They carried her away against her wish to a room on the lower floor, and there she lay, her slight figure shaken with her gasps, and her eyes staring at the ceiling, the woman of the house vainly trying to soothe her. They could hear from this chamber the people moving about above, and she implored to be allowed to go back, and was only kept from doing so by the assurance that if there were any hope, her presence might do harm, and the remainder that it was necessary to take care of herself, lest she should endanger a coming life. Her inquiries were incessant, and at last Jude came down and told her there was no hope. As soon as she could speak, she informed him what she had said to the boy, and how she thought herself the cause of this. "No," said Jude, "it was in his nature to do it. The doctor says there are such boys springing up amongst us, boys of a sort unknown in the last generation, the outcome of new views of life. They seem to see all its terrors before they are old enough to have staying power to resist them. He says it is the beginning of the coming universal wish not to live. He's an advanced man, the doctor, but he can give no consolation to—" Jude had kept back his own grief on account of her, but he now broke down, and this stimulated Sue to efforts of sympathy which in some degree distracted her from her poignant self-reproach. When everybody was gone, she was allowed to see the children. The boy's face expressed the whole tale of their situation. On that little shape had converged all the inauspiciousness and shadow which had darkened the first union of Jude, and all the accidents, mistakes, fears, errors of the last. He was their nodal point, their focus, their expression in a single term. For the rashness of those parents he had groaned, for their ill assortment he had quaked, and for the misfortunes of these he had died. When the house was silent, and they could do nothing but await the coroner's inquest, a subdued, large, low voice spread into the air of the room from behind the heavy walls at the back. "What is it?" said Sue, her spasmodic breathing suspended. "The organ of the college chapel. The organist practising, I suppose. It's the anthem from the 73rd Psalm. Truly God is loving unto Israel." She sobbed again. "Oh, oh, my babies! They had done no harm. Why should they have been taken away and not I?" There was another stillness, broken at last by the two persons in conversation somewhere without. "They are talking about us, no doubt," moaned Sue. "We are made a spectacle unto the world, and to angels and to men." Jude listened. "No, they are not talking of us," he said. "They are two clergymen of different views arguing about the eastward position. Good God! The eastward position, and all creation groaning." Then another silence, till she was seized by another uncontrollable fit of grief. "There is something external to us which says, 'You shan't.' First it said, 'You shan't learn.' Then it said, 'You shan't labour.' Now it says, 'You shan't love.'" He tried to soothe her by saying, "That's bitter of you, darling. But it's true." Thus they waited, and she went back again to her room. The baby's frock, shoes, and socks, which had been lying on a chair at the time of his death, she would not now have removed, though Jude would fain have got them out of her sight. But whenever he touched them, she implored him to let them lie, and burst out almost savagely at the woman of the house when she also attempted to put them away. Jude dreaded her dull, apathetic silences almost more than her paroxysms. "Why don't you speak to me, Jude?" she cried out, after one of these. "Don't turn away from me. I can't bear the loneliness of being out of your looks." "There, dear, here I am," he said, putting his face close to hers. "Yes. Oh, my comrade, our perfect union, our two-in-oneness, is now stained with blood." "Shadowed by death, that's all." "Ah, but it was I who incited him, really, though I didn't know I was doing it. I talked to the child as one should only talk to people of mature age. I said the world was against us, that it was better to be out of life than in it at this price, and he took it literally, and I told him I was going to have another child. It upset him. Oh, how bitterly he upbraided me." "Why did you do it, Sue?" "I can't tell. It was that I wanted to be truthful. I couldn't bear deceiving him as to the facts of life, and yet I wasn't truthful, for with a false delicacy I told him too obscurely. Why was I half wiser than my fellow women, and not entirely wiser? Why didn't I tell him pleasant untruths instead of half realities? It was my want of self-control, so that I could neither conceal things nor reveal them." "Your plan might have been a good one for the majority of cases, only in our particular case it chanced to work badly, perhaps. He must have known sooner or later. And I was just making my baby darling a new frock, and now I shall never see him in it and never talk to him any more. My eyes are so swollen that I can scarcely see, and yet little more than a year ago I called myself happy. We went about loving each other too much, indulging ourselves to utter selfishness with each other. We said, do you remember, that we would make a virtue of joy. I said it was nature's intention, nature's law and raison d'etre that we should be joyful in what instincts she afforded us, instincts which civilization had taken upon itself to thwart. What dreadful things I said! And now fate has given us this stab in the back for being such fools as to take nature at her word." She sank into a quiet contemplation till she said, "It is best, perhaps, that they should be gone. Yes, I see it is. Better that they should be plucked fresh than stay to wither away miserably." "Yes," replied Jude. "Some say that the elders should rejoice when their children die in infancy. But they don't know. Oh, my babies, could you be alive now? You may say the boy wished to be out of life, or he wouldn't have done it. It was not unreasonable for him to die. It was part of his incurably sad nature, poor little fellow. But then the others, my own children and yours." Again Sue looked at the hanging little frock and at the socks and shoes, and her figure quivered like a string. "I am a pitiable creature," she said, "good neither for earth nor heaven any more. I am driven out of my mind by things. What ought to be done?" She stared at Jude and tightly held his hand. "Nothing can be done," he replied. "Things are as they are, and will be brought to their destined issue." She paused. "Yes. Who said that?" she asked heavily. "It comes in the chorus of the Agamemnon. It has been in my mind continually since this happened." "My poor Jude, how you've missed everything. You more than I, for I did get you. To think you should know that by your unassisted reading and yet be in poverty and despair." After such momentary diversions her grief would return in a wave. The jury, duly came and viewed the bodies. The inquest was held, and next arrived the melancholy morning of the funeral. Accounts in the newspapers had brought to the spot curious idlers, who stood apparently counting the window-panes and the stones of the walls. Doubt of the real relations of the couple added zest to their curiosity. Sue had declared that she would follow the two little ones to the grave, but at the last moment she gave way, and the coffins were quietly carried out of the house while she was lying down. Jude got into the vehicle, and it drove away, much to the relief of the landlord, who now had only Sue and her luggage remaining on his hands, which he hoped to be also clear of later on in the day, and so to have freed his house from the exasperating notoriety it had acquired during the week through his wife's unlucky admission of these strangers. In the afternoon he privately consulted with the owner of the house, and they agreed that if any objection to it arose from the tragedy which had occurred there, they would try to get its number changed. When Jude had seen the two little boxes, one containing little Jude, and the other, the two smallest, deposited in the earth, he hastened back to Sue, who was still in her room, and he therefore did not disturb her just then. Feeling anxious, however, he went again about 4 o'clock. The woman thought she was still lying down, but returned to him to say that she was not in her bedroom after all. Her hat and jacket, too, were missing. She had gone out. Jude hurried off to the public house where he was sleeping. She had not been there. Then, bethinking himself of possibilities, he went along the road to the cemetery, which he entered, and crossed to where the interments had recently taken place. The idlers who had followed to the spot by reason of the tragedy were all gone now. A man with a shovel in his hands was attempting to earth in the common grave of the 3 children, but his arm was held back by an expostulating woman who stood in the half-filled hole. It was Sue, whose coloured clothing, which he had never thought of changing for the mourning he had brought, suggested to the eye a deeper grief than the conventional garb of bereavement could express. "He's filling them in, and he shan't till I've seen my little ones again," she cried wildly when she saw Jude. "I want to see them once more. Oh, Jude, please, Jude, I want to see them. I didn't know you would let them be taken while I was asleep. You said perhaps I should see them once more before they were screwed down, and then you didn't, but took them away. Oh, Jude, you are cruel to me, too." "She's been wanting me to dig out the grave again and let her get to the coffins," said the man with the spade. "She ought to be took home by the look of her. She's hardly responsible, poor thing, seemingly. Can't dig 'em up again now, ma'am. Do ye go home with your husband and take it quiet, and thank God that there'll be another soon to swage your grief." But Sue kept asking piteously, "Can't I see them once more? Just once? Can't I? Only just one little minute, Jude. It would not take long, and I should be so glad, Jude. I'll be so good, and not disobey you ever any more, Jude, if you'll let me. I would go home quietly afterwards and not want to see them any more. Can't I? Why can't I?" Thus she went on. Jude was thrown into such acute sorrow that he almost felt he would try to get the man to accede, but it could do no good, and might make her still worse, and he saw that it was imperative to get her home at once. So he coaxed her, and whispered tenderly, and put his arm round her to support her, till she helplessly gave in, and was induced to leave the cemetery. He wished to obtain a fly to take her back in, but economy being so imperative, she deprecated his doing so, and they walked along slowly, Jude in black crape, she in brown and red clothing. They were to have gone to a new lodging that afternoon, but Jude saw that it was not practicable, and in course of time they entered the now hated house. Sue was at once got to bed, and the doctor sent for. Jude waited all the evening downstairs. At a very late hour the intelligence was brought to him that a child had been prematurely born, and that it, like the others, was a corpse. 3. Sue was convalescent, though she had hoped for death, and Jude had again obtained work at his old trade. They were in other lodgings now, in the direction of Beersheba, and not far from the church of ceremonies, St. Silas. They would sit silent, more bodeful of the direct antagonism of things than of their insate and stolid obstructiveness. Vague and quaint imaginings had haunted Sue in the days when her intellect scintillated like a star, that the world resembled a stanza or melody composed in a dream. It was wonderfully excellent to the half-aroused intelligence, but hopelessly absurd at the full waking, that the first cause worked automatically like a somnambulist and not reflectively like a sage, that at the framing of the terrestrial conditions there seemed never to have been contemplated such a development of emotional perceptiveness among the creatures subject to those conditions as that reached by thinking and educated humanity. But affliction makes opposing forces loom anthropomorphous, and those ideas were now exchanging for a sense of Jude and herself fleeing from a persecutor. "We must conform," she said mournfully. "All the ancient wrath of the power above us has been vented upon us, his poor creatures, and we must submit. There is no choice. We must. It is no use fighting against God." "It is only against man and senseless circumstance," said Jude. "True," she murmured. "What have I been thinking of? I am getting as superstitious as a savage. But whoever or whatever our foe may be, I am cowed into submission. I have no more fighting strength left, no more enterprise. I am beaten, beaten. We are made a spectacle unto the world and to angels and to men. I am always saying that now." "I feel the same." "What shall we do? You are in work now, but remember it may only be because our history and relations are not absolutely known. Possibly, if they knew our marriage had not been formalized, they would turn you out of your job as they did at Aldbrickham." "I hardly know. Perhaps they would hardly do that. However, I think that we ought to make it legal now, as soon as you are able to go out." "You think we ought?" "Certainly." And Jude fell into thought. "I have seemed to myself lately," he said, "to belong to that vast band of men shunned by the virtuous, the men called seducers. It amazes me when I think of it. I have not been conscious of it, or of any wrongdoing towards you, whom I love more than myself, yet I am one of those men. I wonder if any other of them are the same purblind, simple creatures as I. Yes, Sue, that's what I am. I seduced you. You were a distinct type, a refined creature intended by nature to be left intact, but I couldn't leave you alone." "No, no, Jude," she said quickly. "Don't reproach yourself with being what you are not. If anybody is to blame, it is I. I supported you in your resolve to leave Phillotson, and without me, perhaps, you wouldn't have urged him to let you go. I should have just the same. As to ourselves, the fact of our not having entered into a legal contract is the saving feature in our union. We have thereby avoided insulting, as it were, the solemnity of our first marriages." "Solemnity?" Jude looked at her with some surprise, and grew conscious that she was not the Sue of their earlier time. "Yes," she said, with a little quiver in her words. "I have had dreadful fears, a dreadful sense of my own insolence of action. I have thought that I am still his wife." "Whose?" "Richard's." "Good God, dearest! Why?" "Oh, I can't explain. Only the thought comes to me." "It is your weakness, a sick fancy, without reason or meaning. Don't let it trouble you." Sue sighed uneasily. As a set-off against such discussions as these, there had come an improvement in their pecuniary position, which earlier in their experience would have made them cheerful. Jude had quite unexpectedly found good employment at his old trade almost directly he arrived, the summer weather suiting his fragile constitution, and outwardly his days went on with that monotonous uniformity which is in itself so grateful after vicissitude. People seemed to have forgotten that he had ever shown any awkward aberrances, and he daily mounted to the parapets and copings of colleges he could never enter, and renewed the crumbling freestones of mullioned windows he would never look from, as if he had known no wish to do otherwise. There was this change in him, that he did not often go to any service at the churches now. One thing troubled him more than any other, that Sue and himself had mentally travelled in opposite directions since the tragedy. Events which had enlarged his own views of life, laws, customs, and dogmas, had not operated in the same manner on Sue's. She was no longer the same as in independent days, when her intellect played like lambent lightning over conventions and formalities which he at that time respected, though he did not now. On a particular Sunday evening he came in rather late. She was not at home, but she soon returned, when he found her silent and meditative. "What are you thinking of, little woman?" he asked, curiously. "Oh, I can't tell clearly. I have thought that we have been selfish, careless, even impious in our courses, you and I. Our life has been a vain attempt at self-delight. But self-abnegation is the higher road. We should mortify the flesh, the terrible flesh, the curse of Adam." "Sue," he murmured, "what has come over you?" "We ought to be continually sacrificing ourselves on the altar of duty. But I have always striven to do what has pleased me. I well deserve the scourging I have got. I wish something would take the evil right out of me, and all my monstrous errors, and all my sinful ways. Sue, my own too suffering dear, there's no evil woman in you. Your natural instincts are perfectly healthy. Not quite so impassioned, perhaps, as I could wish, but good and dear and pure. And as I have often said, you are absolutely the most ethereal, least sensual woman I ever knew to exist without inhuman sexlessness. Why do you talk in such a changed way? We have not been selfish, except when no one could profit by our being otherwise. You used to say that human nature was noble and long-suffering, not vile and corrupt, and at last I thought you spoke truly. And now you seem to take such a much lower view. I want a humble heart and a chastened mind, and I have never had them yet. You have been fearless, both as a thinker and a feeler, and you deserved more admiration than I gave. I was too full of narrow dogmas at that time to see it. Don't say that, Jude. I wish my every fearless word and thought could be rooted out of my history. Self-renunciation, that's everything. I cannot humiliate myself too much. I should like to prick myself all over with pins and bleed out the badness that's in me. Hush, he said, pressing her little face against his breast as if she were an infant. It is bereavement that has brought you to this. Such remorse is not for you, my sensitive plant, but for the wicked ones of the earth, who never feel it. I ought not to stay like this, she murmured, when she had remained in the position a long while. Why not? It is indulgence. Still on the same tack? But is there anything better on earth than that we should love one another? Yes. It depends on the sort of love. And yours. Ours is the wrong. I won't have it, Sue. Come, when do you wish our marriage to be signed in a vestry? She paused and looked up uneasily. Never, she whispered. Not knowing the whole of her meaning, he took the objection serenely and said nothing. Several minutes elapsed, and he thought she had fallen asleep, but he spoke softly and found that she was wide awake all the time. She sat upright and sighed. There is a strange, indescribable perfume or atmosphere about you tonight, Sue, he said. I mean, not only mentally, but about your clothes also. A sort of vegetable scent which I seem to know, yet cannot remember. It is incense. Incense? I have been to the service at St. Silas, and I was in the fumes of it. Oh, St. Silas. Yes, I go there sometimes. Indeed, you go there? You see, Jude, it is lonely here in the weekday mornings when you are at work, and I think and think of my... She stopped till she could control the lumpiness of her throat. And I have taken to go in there, as it is so near. Oh, well, of course I say nothing against it, only it is odd for you. They little think what sort of child is among them. What do you mean, Jude? Well, a sceptic, to be plain. How can you pain me so, dear Jude, in my trouble? Yet I know you didn't mean it, but you ought not to say that. I won't, but I am much surprised. Well, I want to tell you something else, Jude. You won't be angry, will you? I have thought of it a good deal since my babies died. I don't think I ought to be your wife, or as your wife, any longer. What? But you are, from your point of view, but... Of course we were afraid of the ceremony, and a good many others would have been in our places with such strong reasons for fears. But experience has proved how we misjudged ourselves and overrated our infirmities, and if you are beginning to respect rites and ceremonies, as you seem to be, I wonder you don't say it shall be carried out instantly. You certainly are my wife, Sue, in all but law. What do you mean by what you said? I don't think I am. Not? But suppose we had gone through the ceremony. Would you feel that you were then? No. I should not feel even then that I was. I should feel worse than I do now. Why so? In the name of all that's perverse, my dear. Because I am Richard's. Ah, you hinted that absurd fancy to me before. It was only an impression with me then. I feel more and more convinced as time goes on that I belong to him or to nobody. My good heavens! How we are changing places! Yes, perhaps so. My good heavens! How we are changing places! Yes, perhaps so. Some few days later, in the dusk of the summer evening, they were sitting in the same small room downstairs, when a knock came to the front door of the carpenter's house where they were lodging, and in a few moments there was a tap at the door of their room. Before they could open it, the comer did so, and a woman's form appeared. "Is Mr. Fawley here?" Jude and Sue started as he mechanically replied in the affirmative, for the voice was Arabella's. He formally requested her to come in, and she sat down in the window bench, where they could distinctly see her outline against the light, but no characteristic that enabled them to estimate her general aspect and air. Yet something seemed to denote that she was not quite so comfortably circumstanced, nor so bouncingly attired, as she had been during Cartlett's lifetime. The three attempted an awkward conversation about the tragedy, of which Jude had felt it to be his duty to inform her immediately, though she had never replied to his letter. "I have just come from the cemetery," she said. "I inquired and found the child's grave. I couldn't come to the funeral. Thank you for inviting me all the same. I read all about it in the papers, and I felt I wasn't wanted." "No, I couldn't come to the funeral," repeated Arabella, who, seeming utterly unable to reach the ideal of a catastrophic manner, fumbled with iterations. "But I am glad I found the grave. As 'tis your trade, Jude, you'll be able to put up a handsome stone to 'em." "I shall put up a headstone," said Jude drearily. "He was my child, and naturally I feel for him." "I hope so. We all did. The others that weren't mine I didn't feel so much for, as was natural." "Of course." A sigh came from the dark corner where Sue sat, "I had often wished I had mine with me," continued Mrs. Cartlett. "Perhaps 'twouldn't have happened then, but of course I didn't wish to take him away from your wife." "I am not his wife," came from Sue. The unexpectedness of her words struck Jude silent. "Oh, I beg your pardon, I'm sure," said Arabella. "I thought you were." Jude had known from the quality of Sue's tone that her new and transcendental views lurked in her words, but all except their obvious meaning was, naturally, missed by Arabella. The latter, after evincing that she was struck by Sue's avowal, recovered herself, and went on to talk with placid bluntness about her boy, for whom, though in his lifetime she had shown no care at all, she now exhibited a ceremonial mournfulness that was apparently sustaining to the conscience. She alluded to the past, and in making some remark appealed again to Sue. There was no answer. Sue had invisibly left the room. "She said she was not your wife?" resumed Arabella in another voice. "Why should she do that?" "I cannot inform you," said Jude shortly. "She is, isn't she? She once told me so." "I don't criticize what she says." "Ah, I see. Well, my time is up. I'm staying here tonight and thought I could do no less than call after our mutual affliction. I'm sleeping at the place where I used to be barmaid, and tomorrow I go back to Alfredston. Father has come home again, and I'm living with him." "He has returned from Australia?" said Jude with languid curiosity. "Yes. Couldn't get on there. Had a rough time of it. Mother died of what do you call it, in the hot weather, and Father and 2 of the young ones have just got back. He's got a cottage near the old place, and for the present I'm keeping house for him." Jude's former wife had maintained a stereotyped manner of strict good breeding even now that Sue was gone, and limited her stay to a number of minutes that should accord with the highest respectability. When she had departed, Jude, much relieved, went to the stairs and called Sue, feeling anxious as to what had become of her. There was no answer, and the carpenter who kept the lodgings said she had not come in. Jude was puzzled, and became quite alarmed at her absence, for the hour was growing late. The carpenter called his wife, who conjectured that Sue might have gone to St. Silas's church, as she often went there. "Surely not at this time of night," said Jude. "It is shut." "She knows somebody who keeps the key, and she has it whenever she wants it." "How long has she been going on with this?" "Oh, some few weeks, I think." Jude went vaguely in the direction of the church, which he had never once approached since he lived out that way years before, when his young opinions were more mystical than they were now. The spot was deserted, but the door was certainly unfastened. He lifted the latch without noise, and pushing to the door behind him, stood absolutely still inside. The prevalent silence seemed to contain a faint sound, explicable as a breathing or a sobbing, which came from the other end of the building. The floor cloth deadened his footsteps as he moved in that direction through the obscurity, which was broken only by the faintest reflected night light from without. High overhead, above the chancel steps, Jude could discern a huge, solidly constructed Latin cross, as large, probably, as the original it was designed to commemorate. It seemed to be suspended in the air by invisible wires. It was set with large jewels, which faintly glimmered in some weak ray caught from outside, as the cross swayed to and fro in a silent and scarcely perceptible motion. Underneath, upon the floor, lay what appeared a heap of black clothes, and from this was repeated the sobbing that he had heard before. It was his Sue's form, prostrate on the paving. "Sue," he whispered. Something white disclosed itself. She had turned up her face. "What do you want with me here, Jude?" she said, almost sharply. "You shouldn't come. I wanted to be alone. Why did you intrude here?" "How can you ask?" he retorted in quick reproach, for his full heart was wounded to its centre at this attitude of hers towards him. "Why do I come? Who has a right to come, I should like to know, if I have not? I, who love you better than my own self, better, far better than you have loved me. What made you leave me to come here alone?" "Don't criticize me, Jude. I can't bear it. I have often told you so. You must take me as I am. I am a wretch, broken by my distractions. I couldn't bear it when Arabella came. I felt so utterly miserable I had to come away. She seems to be your wife still, and Richard to be my husband. But they are nothing to us." "Yes, dear friend, they are. I see marriage differently now. My babies have been taken from me to show me this. Arabella's child killing mine was a judgment, the right slaying the wrong. What shall I do? I am such a vile creature, too worthless to mix with ordinary human beings." "This is terrible," said Jude, verging on tears. "It is monstrous and unnatural for you to be so remorseful when you have done no wrong." "Ah, you don't know my badness," he returned vehemently. "I do. Every atom and drag of it. You make me hate Christianity, or mysticism, or sacerdotalism, whatever it may be called, if it's that which has caused this deterioration in you. That a woman poet, a woman seer, a woman whose soul shone like a diamond, whom all the wise of the world would have been proud of if they could have known you, should degrade herself like this. I am glad I had nothing to do with divinity, damn glad, if it's going to ruin you in this way. You are angry, Jude, and unkind to me, and don't see how things are. Then come along home with me, dearest, and perhaps I shall. I am overburdened, and you, too, are unhinged just now." He put his arm round her and lifted her, but though she came, she preferred to walk without his support. "I don't dislike you, Jude," she said in a sweet and imploring voice. "I love you as much as ever. Only I ought not to love you any more. Oh, I must not any more. I can't own it. But I have made up my mind that I am not your wife. I belong to him. I sacramentally joined myself to him for life. Nothing can alter it." "But surely we are man and wife, if ever two people were in this world. Nature's own marriage it is, unquestionably. But not heaven's. Another was made for me there, and ratified eternally in the church at Melchester. Sue, Sue, affliction has brought you to this unreasonable state. After converting me to your views on so many things, to find you suddenly turned to the right about like this, for no reason whatever, confounding all you have formerly said through sentiment merely. You root out of me what little affection and reverence I had left in me for the church as an old acquaintance. What I can't understand in you is your extraordinary blindness now to your old logic. Is it peculiar to you, or is it common to woman? Is a woman a thinking unit at all, or a fraction always wanting its integer? How you argued that marriage was only a clumsy contract, which it is. How you showed all the objections to it, all the absurdities. If 2 and 2 made 4 when we were happy together, surely they make 4 now. I can't understand it, I repeat." "Ah, dear Jude, that's because you are like a totally deaf man observing people listening to music. You say, 'What are they regarding? Nothing is there.' But something is. That is a hard saying from you, and not a true parallel. You threw off old husks and prejudices, and taught me to do it, and now you go back upon yourself. I confess I am utterly stultified in my estimate of you. Dear friend, my only friend, don't be hard with me. I can't help being as I am. I am convinced I am right, that I see the light at last. But oh, how to profit by it! They walked along a few more steps till they were outside the building, and she had returned the key. "Can this be the girl?" said Jude when she came back, feeling a slight renewal of elasticity now that he was in the open street. "Can this be the girl who brought the pagan deities into this most Christian city, who mimicked Miss Fontover when she crushed them with her heel, quoted Gibbon and Shelley and Mill? Where are dear Apollo and dear Venus now?" "Oh, don't be so cruel to me, Jude, and I so unhappy," she sobbed. "I can't bear it. I was in error. I cannot reason with you. I was wrong, proud in my own conceit. Arabella's coming was the finish. Don't satirize me. It cuts like a knife." He flung his arms round her and kissed her passionately there in the silent street before she could hinder him. They went on till they came to a little coffee-house. "Jude," she said with suppressed tears, "would you mind getting a lodging here?" "I will, if you really wish. But do you? Let me go to our door and understand you." He went and conducted her in. She said she wanted no supper, and went in the dark upstairs and struck a light. Turning, she found that Jude had followed her and was standing at the chamber door. She went to him, put her hand in his, and said, "Good night." "But, Sue, don't we live here? You said you would do as I wished." "Yes, very well. Perhaps it was wrong of me to argue distastefully as I have done. Perhaps as we couldn't conscientiously marry at first in the old-fashioned way, we ought to have parted. Perhaps the world is not illuminated enough for such experiments as ours. Who were we to think we could act as pioneers? I am so glad you see that much, at any rate. I never deliberately meant to do as I did. I slipped into my false position through jealousy and agitation. But surely through love. You loved me." "Yes, but I wanted to let it stop there and go on always as mere lovers until—" "But people in love couldn't live forever like that." "Women could. Men can't, because they won't. An average woman is in this superior to an average man, that she never instigates, only responds. We ought to have lived in mental communion, and no more. I was the unhappy cause of the change, as I have said before. Well, as you will. But human nature can't help being itself." "Oh, yes, that's just what it has to learn, self-mastery." "I repeat, if either were to blame, it was not you, but I." "No, it was I. Your wickedness was only the natural man's desire to possess the woman. Mine was not the reciprocal wish till envy stimulated me to oust Arabella. I had thought I ought in charity to let you approach me, that it was damnably selfish to torture you as I did my other friend. But I shouldn't have given way if you hadn't broken me down by making me fear you would go back to her. But don't let us say any more about it. Jude, will you leave me to myself now?" "Yes." "But, Sue, my wife as you are," he burst out, "my old reproach to you was, after all, a true one. You never loved me as I loved you. Never, never. Yours is not a passionate heart. Your heart does not burn in a flame. You are, upon the whole, a sort of fay or sprite, not a woman. At first I did not love you, Jude, that I own. When I first knew you, I merely wanted you to love me. I did not exactly flirt with you, but that inborn craving which undermines some women's morals almost more than unbridled passion, the craving to attract and captivate, regardless of the injury it may do the man, was in me. And when I found I had caught you, I was frightened. And then, I don't know how it was, I couldn't bear to let you go, possibly to Arabella again, and so I got to love you, Jude. But you see, however fondly it ended, It began in the selfish and cruel wish to make your heart ache for me without letting mine ache for you. And now you add to your cruelty by leaving me. Ah, yes, the further I flounder, the more harm I do. Oh, Sue, he said, with a sudden sense of his own danger, do not do an immoral thing for moral reasons. You have been my social salvation. Stay with me for humanity's sake. You know what a weak fellow I am. My two arch enemies you know. My weakness for womankind and my impulse to strong liquor. Don't abandon to me them, Sue, to save your own soul only. They have been kept entirely at a distance since you became my guardian angel. Since I have had you, I have been able to go into any temptations of the sort without risk. Isn't my safety worth a little sacrifice of dogmatic principle? I am in terror, lest if you leave me, it will be with me another case of that pig that was washed turning back into wallowing in the mire. Sue burst out weeping. Oh, but you must not, Jude. You won't. I'll pray for you night and day. Well, never mind. Don't grieve, said Jude generously. I did suffer, God knows, about you at that time, and now I suffer again, but perhaps not so much as you. The woman mostly gets the worst of it in the long run. She does. Unless she is absolutely worthless and contemptible, and this one is not that, anyhow. She drew a nervous breath or two. She is, I fear. Now, Jude, good night, please. I mustn't stay. Not just once more, as it has been so many times. Oh, Sue, my wife, why not? No, no, not wife. I am in your hands, Jude. Don't tempt me back now I have advanced so far. Very well. I do your bidding. I owe that to you, darling, in penance for how I overruled it at the first time. My God, how selfish I was. Perhaps I spoilt one of the highest and purest loves that ever existed between man and woman. Then let the veil of our temple be rent in two from this hour. He went to the bed, removed one of the pair of pillows thereon, and flung it to the floor. Sue looked at him, and bending over the bed rail, wept silently. You don't see that it is a matter of conscience with me, and not of dislike to you, she brokenly murmured. Dislike to you. But I can't say any more. It breaks my heart. It will be undoing all I have begun. Jude, good night. Good night, he said, and turned to go. Oh, but you shall kiss me, she said, starting up. I can't bear. He clasped her and kissed her weeping face as he had scarcely ever done before, and they remained in silence till she said, Goodbye, goodbye. And then, gently pressing him away, she got free, trying to mitigate the sadness by saying, We'll be dear friends just the same, Jude, won't we? And we'll see each other sometimes. Yes, and forget all this, and try to be as we were long ago. Jude did not permit himself to speak, but turned and descended the stairs. 4. The man whom Sue, in her mental volte-face, was now regarding as her inseparable husband, lived still at Mary Green. On the day before the tragedy of the children, Phillotson had seen both her and Jude as they stood in the rain at Christminster watching the procession to the theatre, but he had said nothing of it at the moment to his companion Gillingham, who, being an old friend, was staying with him at the village aforesaid, and had indeed suggested the day's trip to Christminster. "What are you thinking of?" said Gillingham, as they went home. "The university degree you never obtained?" "No, no," said Phillotson gruffly. "Of somebody I saw today." In a moment he added, "Susanna." "I saw her too." "You said nothing?" I didn't wish to draw your attention to her, but as you did see her, you should have said, 'How do you do, my dear that was?'" "Ah, well, I might have. But what do you think of this? I have good reason for supposing that she was innocent when I divorced her, that I was all wrong. Yes, indeed. Awkward, isn't it? She has taken care to set you right since, anyhow, apparently." That's a cheap sneer. I ought to have waited, unquestionably." At the end of the week, when Gillingham had gone back to his school near Shaston, Phillotson, as was his custom, went to Alfredston Market. Ruminating again on Arabella's intelligence as he walked down the long hill which he had known before Jude knew it, though his history had not beaten so intensely upon its incline. Arrived in the town, he bought his usual weekly local paper, and when he had sat down in an inn to refresh himself for the 5 miles walk back, he pulled the paper from his pocket and read a while. The account of the strange suicide of a stonemason's children met his eye. Unimpassioned as he was, it impressed him painfully and puzzled him not a little, for he could not understand the age of the elder child being what it was stated to be. However, there was no doubt that the newspaper report was in some way true. "Their cup of sorrow is now full," he said, and thought of Sue and what she had gained by leaving him. Arabella having made her home at Alfredston, and the schoolmaster coming to market there every Saturday, it was not wonderful that in a few weeks they met again, the precise time being just after her return from Christminster, where she had stayed much longer than she had at first intended, keeping an interested eye on Jude, though Jude had seen no more of her. Phillotson was on his way homeward when he encountered Arabella, and she was approaching the town. "You like walking out this way, Mrs. Cartlett?" he said. "I've just begun to again," she replied. "It is where I lived as maid and wife, and all the past things of my life that are interesting to my feelings are mixed up with this road, and they have been stirred up in me too lately, for I've been visiting at Christminster. Yes, I've seen Jude." "Ah, how do they bear their terrible affliction?" "In a very strange way, very strange. She don't live with him any longer. I only heard of it as a certainty just before I left, though I had thought things were drifting that way from their manner when I called on them." "Not live with her husband? Why, I should have thought 'twould have united them more." "He's not her husband, after all. She has never really married him, although they have passed as man and wife so long. And now, instead of this sad event making 'em hurry up and get the thing done legally, she's took in a queer religious way, just as I was in my affliction at losing Cartlett, only hers is of a more hysterical sort than mine. And she says, so I was told, that she's your wife in the eye of heaven and the church, yours only, and can't be anybody else's by any act of man." "Ah, indeed. Separated, have they?" "You see, the eldest boy was mine." "Oh, yours?" "Yes, poor little fellow. Born in lawful wedlock, thank God. And perhaps she feels, over and above other things, that I ought to have been in her place. I can't say. However, as for me, I'm soon off from here. I've got father to look after now, and we can't live in such a humdrum place as this. I hope soon to be in a bar again at Christminster or some other big town." They parted. When Phillotson had ascended the hill a few steps, he stopped, hastened back, and called her. "What is, or was, their address?" Arabella gave it. "Thank you. Good afternoon." Arabella smiled grimly as she resumed her way, and practised dimple-making all along the road from where the pollard willows begin to the old almshouses in the first street of the town. Meanwhile, Phillotson ascended to Mary Green, and for the first time during a lengthened period he lived with a forward eye. On crossing under the large trees of the green to the humble schoolhouse to which he had been reduced, he stood a moment and pictured Sue coming out of the door to meet him. No man had ever suffered more inconvenience from his own charity, Christian or heathen, than Phillotson had done in letting Sue go. He had been knocked about from pillar to post at the hands of the virtuous almost beyond endurance. He had been nearly starved, and was now dependent entirely upon the very small stipend from the school of this village, where the parson had got ill spoken of for befriending him. He had often thought of Arabella's remarks that he should have been more severe with Sue, that her recalcitrant spirit would soon have been broken. Yet such was his obstinate and illogical disregard of opinion, and of the principles in which he had been trained, that his convictions on the rightness of his course with his wife had not been disturbed. Principles which could be subverted by feeling in one direction were liable to the same catastrophe in another. The instincts which had allowed him to give Sue her liberty now enabled him to regard her as none the worse for her life with Jude. He wished for her still, in his curious way, if he did not love her, and apart from policy, soon felt that he would be gratified to have her again as his, always provided that she came willingly. But artifice was necessary, he had found, for stemming the cold and inhumane blast of the world's contempt, and here were the materials ready-made. By getting Sue back and remarrying her on the respectable plea of having entertained erroneous views of her, and gained his divorce wrongfully, he might acquire some comfort, resume his old courses, perhaps return to the Shaston school, if not even to the church, as a licentiate. He thought he would write to Gillingham to inquire his views, and what he thought of his, Phillotson's, sending a letter to her. Gillingham replied, naturally, that now she was gone it was best to let her be, and considered that if she were anybody's wife she was the wife of the man to whom she had borne 3 children and owed such tragical adventures. Probably, as his attachment to her seemed unusually strong, the singular pair would make their union legal in course of time, and all would be well and decent and in order. "But they won't. Sue won't," exclaimed Phillotson to himself. "Gillingham is so matter-of-fact. She's affected by Christminster sentiment and teaching. I can see her views on the indissolubility of marriage well enough, and I know where she got them. They are not mine, but I shall make use of them to further mine." He wrote a brief reply to Gillingham. "I know I am entirely wrong, but I don't agree with you. As to her having lived with and had 3 children by him, my feeling is, though I can advance no logical or moral defence of it on the old lines, that it has done little more than finish her education. I shall write to her, and learn whether what that woman said is true or no." As he had made up his mind to do this before he had written to his friend, there had not been much reason for writing to the latter at all. However, it was Phillotson's way to act thus. He accordingly addressed a carefully considered epistle to Sue, and knowing her emotional temperament, threw a rhadamanthine strictness into the lines here and there, carefully hiding his heterodox feelings not to frighten her. He stated that, it having come to his knowledge that her views had considerably changed, he felt compelled to say that his own, too, were largely modified by events subsequent to their parting. He would not conceal from her that passionate love had little to do with his communication. It arose from a wish to make their lives, if not a success, at least no such disastrous failure as they threatened to become, through his acting on what he had considered at the time a principle of justice, charity, and reason. To indulge one's instinctive and uncontrolled sense of justice and right was not, he had found, permitted with impunity in an old civilization like ours. It was necessary to act under an acquired and cultivated sense of the same if you wished to enjoy an average share of comfort and honour, and to let crude loving-kindness take care of itself. He suggested that she should come to him there at Mary Green. On second thoughts he took out the last paragraph but one, and having rewritten the letter he dispatched it immediately and in some excitement awaited the issue. A few days after, a figure moved through the white fog which enveloped the Beersheba suburb of Christminster towards the quarter in which Jude Fawley had taken up his lodging since his division from Sue. A timid knock sounded upon the door of his abode. It was evening, so he was at home, and by a species of divination he jumped up and rushed to the door himself. "Will you come out with me? I would rather not come in. I want to talk with you, to go with you to the cemetery." It had been in the trembling accents of Sue that these words came. Jude put on his hat. "It is dreary for you to be out," he said, "but if you prefer not to come in, I don't mind." "Yes, I do. I shall not keep you long." Jude was too much affected to go on talking at first. She, too, was now such a mere cluster of nerves that all initiatory power seemed to have left her, and they proceeded through the fog like acheronic shades for a long while, without sound or gesture. "I want to tell you," she presently said, her voice now quick, now slow, "so that you may not hear of it by chance. I am going back to Richard. He has, so magnanimously, agreed to forgive all." "Going back? How can you go?" "He is going to marry me again. That is for form's sake, and to satisfy the world, which does not see things as they are. But of course I am his wife already. Nothing has changed that." He turned upon her with an anguish that was well nigh fierce. "But you are my wife. Yes, you are. You know it. I have always regretted that feint of ours in going away and pretending to come back legally married to save appearances. I loved you and you loved me, and we closed with each other, and that made the marriage. We still love, you as well as I. I know it, Sue. Therefore our marriage is not cancelled." "Yes, I know how you see it," she answered with despairing self-suppression. "But I am going to marry him again, as it would be called by you. Strictly speaking, you too, don't mind my saying it, Jude, you should take back Arabella." "I should? Good God, what next? But how if you and I had married legally, as we were on the point of doing?" "I should have felt just the same, that ours was not a marriage, and I would go back to Richard without repeating the sacrament if he asked me. But the world and its ways have a certain worth, I suppose. Therefore I concede a repetition of the ceremony. Don't crush all the life out of me by satire and argument, I implore you. I was strongest once, I know, and perhaps I treated you cruelly. But, Jude, return good for evil. I am the weaker now. Don't retaliate upon me, but be kind. Oh, be kind to me, a poor wicked woman who is trying to mend." He shook his head hopelessly, his eyes wet. The blow of her bereavement seemed to have destroyed her reasoning faculty. The once keen vision was dimmed. "All wrong, all wrong," he said huskily. "Error, perversity. It drives me out of my senses. Do you care for him? Do you love him? You know you don't. It will be fanatic prostitution. God forgive me. Yes, that's what it will be." "I don't love him. I must own it in deepest remorse. But I shall try to learn to love him by obeying him." Jude argued, urged, implored, but her conviction was proof against all. It seemed to be the one thing on earth on which she was firm. and that her firmness in this had left her tottering in every other impulse and wish she possessed. "I have been considerate enough to let you know the whole truth, and to tell it you myself," she said in cut tones, "that you might not consider yourself slighted by hearing of it at second hand. I have even owned the extreme fact that I do not love him. I did not think you would be so rough with me for doing so. I was going to ask you—" "To give you away?" "No, to send my boxes to me, if you would, but I suppose you won't." "Why, of course I will. What, isn't he coming to fetch you, to marry you from here? He won't condescend to do that?" "No, I won't let him. I go to him voluntarily, just as I went away from him. We are to be married at his little church at Mary Green." She was so sadly sweet in what he called her wrong-headedness that Jude could not help being moved to tears more than once for pity of her. "I never knew such a woman for doing impulsive penances as you, Sue. No sooner does one expect you to go straight on, as the one rational proceeding, than you double round the corner." "Ah, well, let that go. Jude, I must say good-bye. But I wanted you to go to the cemetery with me. Let our farewell be there, beside the graves of those who died to bring home to me the error of my views." They turned in the direction of the place, and the gate was opened to them on application. Sue had been there often, and she knew the way to the spot in the dark. They reached it and stood still. "It is here I should like to part," said she. "So be it. Don't think me hard because I have acted on conviction. Your generous devotion to me is unparalleled, Jude. Your worldly failure, if you have failed, is to your credit rather than to your blame. Remember that the best and greatest among mankind are those who do themselves no worldly good. Every successful man is more or less a selfish man. The devoted fail. Charity seeketh not her own. In that chapter we are at one, ever-beloved darling, and on it we'll part friends. Its verses will stand fast when all the rest that you call religion has passed away." "Well, don't discuss it. Goodbye, Jude, my fellow sinner and kindest friend. Goodbye, my mistaken wife. Goodbye." 5. The next afternoon the familiar Christminster fog still hung over all things. Sue's slim shape was only just discernible going towards the station. Jude had no heart to go to his work that day, neither could he go anywhere in the direction by which she would be likely to pass. He went in an opposite one, to a dreary, strange, flat scene where boughs dripped and coughs and consumption lurked, and where he had never been before. "Sue's gone from me, gone," he murmured miserably. She, in the meantime, had left by the train and reached Alfredston Road, where she entered the steam tram and was conveyed into the town. It had been her request to Phillotson that he should not meet her. She wished, she said, to come to him voluntarily to his very house and hearthstone.